Welcome to today's session of Through the Bible Women's Bible Study. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 25 today. Now Sarah, we lost her in chapter 24, and Abraham bought some land, a cave, and buried her in it, the only land he ever owned. Now we're picking up with him after her death. Verse 1 through 4 says, Abraham had taken another wife whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites, the Letushites, and the Lemuites. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Hanok, Abida, Eldah. These were the descendants of Keturah. So another wife, this time a concubine, and boy, did they have children. We don't know for sure if this is before Sarah dies or after. So just a note, in Hebrew writing, chronological order isn't as important as it is to us in the West. So this could have been before Sarah died. Jewish tradition says it was just another name for Hagar, but that doesn't seem likely. So he has 6 more sons. So in total he has 8 sons. 6 of these sons are born after Abraham turns 137 years old. Each of these sons became the fathers of distinct peoples. Midian, of course, is the father of the Midianites. Moses' wife is a Midianite. This also shows again that whatever fertility problems there were, it wasn't with Abraham. Some of the names in this list are associated with Syria and Arabia. Verse 5 and 6, Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. Isaac is still the son of the promise. He is heir to everything, the wealth in the land. Sons of concubines inherit from their mother. So there was no danger of them inheriting from Abraham, but Abraham gave them gifts anyway. He is dad. Verse 6 is another one of those chronological things. In our culture, we'd say he'd already sent Hagar and Ishmael away. Well, this verse is saying he sent Hagar and Keturah and sons away. So he does this to make sure there's no question of who inherits everything. We don't know what kind of gifts he gave when he sent them away. Now, while this seems cruel to send your children away, this is the ancient way to legally show the father's choice of inheritance. And this is how to deal with the semi-legal sons of a concubine. Notice here it does clarify concubines. Keturah was not on the same level as Sarah. Verse 7 to 11, Abraham lived 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite, the field Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah, and after Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beer Lahai Roi. So, one of the most important men in the Bible has passed on. He is mentioned 70 times in the New Testament alone. Only Moses is mentioned more times, 80. What a remarkable life. Obviously not a perfect life, but he was a man of faith who had a remarkable relationship with God. Verse 8 describes a good life. The same description is used of Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob when they die. Death is not something to be feared, but to be expected at the end of a long life. When it says he was gathered to his people, he obviously doesn't mean he was buried with his parents. Most commentators say that what this means is that he met his family in the afterlife. Notice who's there helping to bury his father? Ishmael. That means he had maintained some sort of relationship with his father. Again, they buried people within 24 hours, so Ishmael likely was with Abraham at his death. Isaac would have been 75 years old, and Ishmael would have been 89 years old. Another example of things not being in chronological order. We haven't heard anything about Jacob yet, but he and Esau are 15 years old at this point when Abraham dies. We just haven't seen him yet. So Abraham is buried with his beloved Sarah. He was a great man, but he was only a man. God's work didn't die with Abraham. His work continued with Isaac. So Isaac settles at Beer Lahai Roi. That's a well where Hagar had run back to in chapter 16. It's on the southern route back to Egypt. Verses 12 through 18. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Sarah's slave Hagar the Egyptian bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, listed in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tamar, Jetor, Naphish, and Kedemah. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names of the 12 tribal rulers according to their settlements and camps. Ishmael lived 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and he was gathered to his people. His descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt as you go toward Ashur. And they lived in hostility toward all the tribes related to them. So 12 sons of Ishmael. With so many sons to carry on his name, he is blessed. Where they settle controls the caravan routes from Egypt to where Assyria and Babylon will be. But there's large cities there already. It's an ideal place for a nomadic tent-dwelling people. Ishmael dies and he's out of the picture. Notice he is not buried with his father. This last statement about hostility, that was their legacy. What's interesting is the place where Hagar was told, this is the same place that Isaac is living now. Now on to Isaac, and remember in their writing, they give the genealogy of the less important and then the most important. Another difference between Western and their cultural writing, we would list the most important first. Verse 19 through 23 says, this is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife, because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from whom within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Now we're back into the line of the promise. Notice verse 19 states 2 times that Abraham is the father of Isaac, as to make sure there is no question of his parentage. He was not the child of Abimelech. He was the child of Abraham. Rabbis say that Isaac looked exactly like Abraham and nothing like Abimelech. We don't have anything that describes how he looks, so it's nice to think that. So this line of promise continues to have trouble. They're having trouble having babies. Notice Ishmael, the brother, had lots of sons. So Rebekah is having trouble conceiving, and Isaac prays. Before you jump to the conclusion that all Isaac had to do was pray, think about it. How long did he pray? 20 years. We all face problems. The issue is, what are you going to do about that problem? Abraham and Sarah had a unique solution to their infertility. They went the surrogate route. Not what God wanted, a bad idea. Isaac has the same problem, and he prays. Great idea. It's a challenge to pray for the same thing over and over and over again. All kind of questions come up. Am I praying for the right thing? Is God listening? Is it in God's will? What's wrong with me? You question your motives. You feel like giving up. Isaac prayed through all this for 20 years. And his prayer is answered. Their faith and persistence in prayer was tested. So there's 2 babies in there, and they are moving a lot. The word used for struggled or jostled here is a violent word in Hebrew. It's like there's a war going on in this woman's stomach. Whatever it is that was happening, it made her run to God. Another good thing. So God tells her, twins, and they're going to each be fathers of nations, but your younger is going to serve your older. God knows the nature of these boys while they're still in the womb. He knows before we come out into this earth. He knew their future. Jewish legend says Jacob and Esau tried to murder each other in the womb. It also says every time Rebekah went near an idol's altar, Esau would go near, Esau would kind of move over toward where the idol was worshipped, and Jacob would just get excited. God chose to go against the normal pattern of the younger serving the older. Why? Something we may not understand, but God does. God chose Jacob. In Romans 9:10 through 13, Paul used this choice of Jacob over Esau before their birth as an illustration of God's choice, saying that God loved Jacob and hated Esau. Now, it's not that God actually hated Esau in the sense of cursing him to a doomed life in this world or the next. As we'll see, Esau is blessed with a lot of wealth. In some ways, he ends up being more well-adjusted, but he is not the son of the promise. In Romans verse by verse, Newell said, a woman once said to Mr. Spurgeon, I cannot understand why God should say that he hated Esau. That, Spurgeon said, is not my difficulty, madam. My trouble is to understand how God should love Jacob. God doesn't make arbitrary choices. They're not random. They're not senseless. So I have a child rearing Q&A for you, and I'll provide the answer. So a question, should I have a baby after 35? No, 35 are plenty. Question, I'm 2 months pregnant now. When will my baby move? Answer, with any luck, right after he finishes college. Question, how will I know if my vomiting is morning sickness or the flu? If it's the flu, you'll get better. Question, what is the most common pregnancy craving? For men to be the ones that get pregnant. Question, my wife is 5 months pregnant and so moody that sometimes she's borderline irrational. So what's your question? My childbirth instructor says it's not pain I'll feel during labor, but pressure. Is she right? Yes, in the same way that a tornado might be called an air current. Question, when is the best time to get an epidural? Right after you find out you're pregnant. Question, does pregnancy cause headaches? Pregnancy causes anything you want to blame it for. So just a little fun there. But can you imagine what it would be like to be a daughter of a famous person growing up in their shadow? For Isaac, he is the son of a famous person. His life is somewhat overshadowed by the life of his father Abraham and his son Jacob. In some ways he's like his father, and in some ways he's not. As we go through this, listen for the ways he's like Dad and where he's not. One way we've already run across is that Isaac didn't follow Mom and Dad's footsteps in trying to help God fulfill the promise of a child. Had he grown up hearing the stories of the problems they went through because of their impatience? Was it a do as I say, not as I do situation? Did he hear stories about Ishmael? Verse 24 and through 26. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. So he was young compared to his dad. Notice God doesn't say what to name them. Their births dictated their names. They are not identical twins. Esau, it came out as a hairy redhead. The Hebrew word Esau sounds like the word for hairy. When we think of a hairy baby, we think, oh, that's probably not a very good looking baby. But the term for hairy used here implies a beautiful, impressive garment. So out comes Jacob holding on to Esau's heel. Jacob means heel catcher. The phrase also means a trickster, a con man, a scoundrel, or a rascal. Not a compliment. Why would you name your son that? Anyone who's named their child Jacob, I wonder if they know what the name means. Verse 27 and 28. The boys grew up and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. The focus on this passage is that they were very different in personalities and tastes. Esau was an outdoor man, while Jacob liked to be home. Jacob was mild. The word for content or mild here means a wholeness rather than a weakness. It's the same word translated blameless in Job 1:8 when God describes Job. Each parent had a favorite child. Isaac was a quiet, peaceful individual. And maybe Esau was everything he wasn't. But wouldn't you think that Rebekah would have shared what God had told her about Jacob and Esau? This favoritism is going to cause huge problems. Favoritism among parents, not a good thing, and here it's going to cause major disasters. Verse 29 through 34. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. Let me say that right. Red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," he said. "What good is a birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. So the literary style in this passage, it's staccato, it's abrupt and sharp. It implies that Esau was as crude as his speech here. He is not asking politely. So they are each acting according to their natural inclination. Esau hunted, Jacob cooked. Edom means red. That's why Esau's descendants are called Edomites. So a little bit about Edomites. During the time of Moses, they regularly attack Israel as they're wandering in the wilderness. Saul fought against them. David subjected them, establishing military garrisons in their area. After the time of Solomon, they revolted and they had some freedom until the Assyrians came through. During the time between the Testaments, the Jews who had come back to Israel, they overpowered the Edomites and they forced them to convert to Judaism. Through all this, the Edomites hated the Jews. Under the Romans, an Edomite, now called Idumeans, was appointed ruler, King Herod the Great. After the Herods died, the Idumean people slowly disappear from history. Of course, they probably just intermarried with other cultures, but you do not find an Idumean culture today. Isn't it interesting that the most famous descendant of Esau would come against the most famous descendant of Jacob? Jesus. Jacob knew that that birthright was valuable and he wanted it. This birthright involved both material and spiritual things. The son of the birthright received a double portion of the inheritance and also became the head of the family and the spiritual leader of the family upon the passing of the father. In addition, in this family, the birthright determined who would inherit the covenant God made with Abraham, the covenant of the land, a nation, and the Messiah. When Esau says he wants some stew, the word means he really wants to gulp it right down right now. And he doesn't say stew. He actually says red stuff, which is why the word Edom or red comes in. So it's like he comes in and gets, "I'm starving, give me some of that red stuff." Esau's thought is he's so hungry, he's going to die without food. That's what we infer from it. But the idea is, I'm going to die one day anyway. What do I care about a birthright? Jacob is acting according to his name. He is a scoundrel taking advantage of his brother. He was scheming to get something that God already said was going to be his. Still, Esau deserves the bigger blame. He gave up his birthright. He didn't have to. He chose to. Ancient documents were discovered that show that the birthright could actually be sold from one brother to another. A father could also choose to give the birthright to a younger son instead of his firstborn. Later in Deuteronomy 21, we're going to see that the transfer of the birthright is forbidden. But this is before. Martin Luther drew attention to an important fact, that this was not a valid transaction, because Jacob tried to buy something that was already his, and Esau tried to sell something that wasn't his. Isn't it interesting that we've run into stories where man fell because of food or drink? Adam and Eve, Noah, and now Esau. And food will continue to be an important part of many stories. The rabbis don't like Esau, so they depict him as a very evil person. But Hebrews 12:16 shows him as spiritually immature. But before we condemn Esau, we have a great birthright. Our inheritance is Jesus. How many times have we sacrificed our birthright because there's some delicious red stuff right there and we're hungry? Our inheritance should be the center of our life. So today, that's where we're going to end today. Tomorrow we'll pick up with Genesis chapter 26. If you've enjoyed this, please click like, consider subscribing so you'll be notified of future sessions, and thank you for joining.